Before we go any further, though, these climate change alarmists won't like it. But here's another issue on which they're miles off the pace: bushfires. It's all climate change, global warming, dare I say, playing the usual game, prospering untruths and trying to frighten the hell out of everybody. And that's all they have left, I guess, in a completely discredited determination to manufacture a climate change response to almost everything. As one of my listeners wrote to me today and said, "This morning, my car didn't start. The television's not working, the dog ran away, my girlfriend left me." I guess the only conclusion is I can blame it on climate change. Why not? I thought I'd just share with you tonight a very interesting letter from an ex-National Parks and Wildlife field officer who's had extensive dealings with rural issues, bushfires, feral animal control and the weather. He reminds me that it was former New South Wales Premier Bob Carr who, in order to tie up the Green vote, renamed state forests and turned them into national parks. Everyone liked the idea at the time. More Australian bush sounded good, being locked away. But as my correspondent says, the new national parks were unmanned. No proper fire breaks, no proper access, no proper fire trails. So when the state forest workers were sacked and left, there was no fuel load reduction program, no crews ready to go in an emergency, no proper fire trails to help fight the fires, and no proper fire breaks to guard people's properties. He wrote and said, "Some fires occur naturally, but in my experience," this is interesting, "in my experience, the majority are from vandalism, arson, or human intervention." He went on, "Another very grave issue is the welfare of our native animals. All the people," he said, "I've ever known, whether they be field officers, farmers or just everyday Australians, love our native animals. But unfortunately, governments which are tied to the Greens do not love our animals because, number one, they don't understand the Australian bush, and number two, they're wrapped up in their own importance and indulgence." He said, quote, "If we keep the fuel load down by having programmed cold burn fires in winter, we don't have raging hot fires in summer that our animals cannot escape from because the fires move too quickly and destroy their habitat and their homes." He wrote to me and he said, quote, "What most people don't understand is the loss of our native animals to feral animals, foxes, cats, pigs, goats, dogs." He said, "I don't know the real figure now, but about 25 years ago, there were 150 species of Australian animals extinct just from cats and foxes." He said, quote, "The Greens do not allow the culling of cats, especially in our national parks. This is an absolute disgrace." Now, here I have to be fair to the Greens. That is not true. Their policy does provide for such culling. But he went on, "I'd love to take a little numbat or bandicoot that had just been ripped apart by a feral cat and put it on their kitchen table." He said, "All non-native animals should be eliminated from our national parks or state forests immediately, but the Greens won't allow it," he said. Now, just repeating, to be fair to the Greens, their policy does provide, in relation to new national parks, amongst other things, and I quote their policy, "removing all deer, horses, cats, foxes and other non-Indigenous vertebrate invasive species from national parks." My former National Parks and Wildlife field officer ended by saying to me, "As for our beloved Australia, Australian bush and animals, farmers and fair dinkum Australians, the only thing that will change our country for the better is to change our voting laws so the majority get voted in and the Greens, who hate everything Australian, get wiped out." Unquote. It's not a bad point. I think the public is sick of being governed by minorities. The answer to that legitimate concern is, of course, first past the post voting, which means no preferential voting. Minorities would remain just that, noise and nothing else. The encouraging thing about the email is that at least the public are waking up, even if governments are not.